thank you all for joining us this afternoon for financial wellness for you and your family member with a disability. Today, Wednesday, August 23rd at noon. Guest from Empire.
Empowered Financial Strategies.
Yes. Disclaimer from the ARC of Lehigh Northampton County's Advocacy Department does not employ lawyers nor provide legal advice. This training or any others provided on the ARC's Advocacy Department does not constitute or imply endorse recommendations or favorings of the providing parties or any employees or contractors acting on its behalf. This webinar is being provided for educational and informative purposes only. And I would finally like to introduce, and it's my pleasure to have you guys here. The Zoom is yours. Thank you, Joanna and Caroline.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us and allowing us to talk today about some really critical planning for families who are caring for a loved one with special needs. So I'm Joanna Craney. I'm a financial advisor and co-founder along with Carolyn Humphrey of Empowered Financial Strategies, also a special needs planner. And my specialization is working with families caring for a loved one with special needs. And this type of planning is unique. We're not only planning for your lifetime of income, right? We're considering another lifetime of income because we have someone that's going to be dependent upon us for the rest of our lives and for the foreseeable future. So we need to take it into account things like government benefits. We need to talk about special needs law and care management. I first hand have navigated the disability world, first as a sibling to two sisters with special needs, and now myself as a caregiver. And so I'm sitting on the same side of the table with a lot of you. I saw that there's a lot of parents and caregiver guardians in the audience today. So I'm with you navigating this complex and overwhelming world. So I understand it from a firsthand perspective. I will let Carolyn introduce herself.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you all for having us. This is a great opportunity to be able to get as much information as we can help. My name's Carolyn. I'm also a financial advisor. I've been in the financial world for about 17 years. I come from a math and computer and economics background, and I tend to be on the other side of our partnership, where I really specialize in helping people of all walks of life retire. And so I help them figure out how to build income streams, how they can take some of the risk of long-term care planning for themselves, how they can understand how Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare is going to work for them. And I met Joanna many, many years ago, but we've really been working together for the last maybe 5 years. And how I kind of see our partnership is I help the parents to figure out how to make sure that they're safe and that they can retire, help them get the oxygen mask on them, and then Joanna can help them get the oxygen mask on their children or their loved one with special needs. And so Joanna and I really work together to work on both sides of the aisle here. And we stay in our own lanes as far as who's good at what. And it really ends up helping the clients to be able to get a full holistic plan for the whole family.
And I'm going to just add our own disclaimer. We are not attorneys. While we will talk about legal things as part of our conversation today, we are not attorneys and we are not giving legal advice, nor are we tax advisors. So while we talk about taxes and certainly a part of our conversations with our clients, we are not giving any particular tax advice either. So there are our disclaimers for the day. So I think we're ready to jump into our questions. And so one of Kodi or Jessica, you'll be fielding the questions that we have prepared, and then we'll have Q&A at the end.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So first question, how do you begin working with clients? Why is it important to not procrastinate on getting started?
First of all, just handle the procrastination. That's one of the toughest things I think we all handle on all areas of our life. We're also busy, and there's so much pressing against our time for our daily busy lives. However, while it's never too late to start planning for a financial future or to build a financial plan, the earlier you can do it, the better. Really, because first of all, if there aren't a lot of things put in place that maybe aren't serving you, we have less to undo and to rework. But really, honestly, it's just having time on your side. The earlier you can start to build for the future, the less aggressive we need to start to take steps. You know, if you've got 30 years to build a plan, we can take little baby steps along the way to get you there. And it's just easier for you. But how we start working with clients is really simply put, we meet them wherever they are. Some people come to us with a lot of planning done. Some people come to us where they haven't done anything. Some come with the wealth of knowledge and some come with very little. And our first step is really just to get to know the client, to understand where they're coming from, what they've done, what they understand, where their knowledge base is, and really help to just get them comfortable where they're at. Then we have a process that we'll take them through that we'll talk a little bit later. I always like to think of us as the financial coach. We're going to be there to help you get from step A to step B to step C all the way to Z. And it's all the baby steps along the way.
Great. And we saw even in our knowledge-based poll that we did that there is a wide variety of comfortability with this topic. So really appreciate that approach. What are key considerations when planning for a family who has a child who may be dependent upon them for the rest of their lives and needs care beyond their lives?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I always tell our families that there's going to be like 4 main areas that we need to consider when planning for someone who's going to be dependent upon us for the rest of their lives. We're going to first address the legal as part of this process. That's a key consideration. And that's the work that you're going to do with an attorney who is specialized in this area of planning, because we see a lot of mistakes. So one of the things that we do is if we know that you don't have your legal documents in place, we're going to point you in the right direction to work with an attorney who's specialized if you don't already have somebody, right? And we're going to talk about making sure that you have your wills, your power of attorney, your living wills. If your child's 18 or older, we're going to talk about what legal documents they need. And then we're going to also talk about a special needs trust. So that falls under the legal channel of our planning. Then there's the financial. That's the work that you're going to do with someone like us who is specialized in this area, or another advisor who is specifically specialized in special needs planning. And the things that we need to consider when we're talking about finances is, one, we need to consider your retirement. As Carolyn mentioned, putting the oxygen mask on yourself. We need to consider all the risks that could really affect your wealth over time. We need to consider the accounts of your child, such as an ABLE account, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. We're going to talk about legacy planning, right? How do we effectively transfer assets when you're no longer here in the most tax efficient way possible, right? Amongst other things. But we all the while need to consider, right, that we have someone that's going to need a set amount of assets to help them continue the quality of life beyond the years that you're going to be here. It's not a subject that most people like to think about, but the reality is if we don't plan, then the worst can happen. So, and we also need to consider government benefits. So that's the other area of planning. We want to make sure that we obtain government benefits, maintain government benefits, and protect those government benefits. We also need to consider care management, right? Because if your loved one needs 24/7 care, or maybe it's, part-time care, we need to work that into our plan, right? And not just when we're no longer here, but it's also when you're in your 70s or 80s or even your 90s, and you're not doing the things that you've been accustomed to doing for your loved one. So we need to work that into our planning and work with the relevant people and professionals and bring them into our planning process. And it's really not until all of these different areas that are addressed that you can say, okay, my plan is complete. Because some people start with the legal and they're like, okay, great. I have my estate documents. I got my special needs trust. And that's great. And you just probably spent a couple $1,000s getting that stuff done. Yet there's no plan to fund the special needs trust. So all you have is a piece of paper. So we really need to consider all these different areas of planning to make sure that your plan is complete. Now, ages are very impactful when we're doing this type of planning. Before 18, you know, there's benefits are going to look different versus post 18. 22 is another age that we need to consider for a benefit that we're going to talk about in a little bit, called the DAC benefit, the Disabled Adult Child Benefit. Also, because Social Security loves to confuse us, they recently changed the term to childhood disability benefit, but basically they're the same thing. And it's the magical age by which, if your loved one has an onset of disability 22 or younger, then they actually could collect off of the parent's work history record. So that's really important. And that's why procrastination, you know, it's critical that we don't procrastinate, because sometimes I see families procrastinate and their loved ones in their 30s thinking, I didn't need those benefits, and now they do. And now we have to go back and prove to Social Security that the disability has been there all along. Another age to consider is age 26. It could be the age that your loved one falls off of medical benefits. So we need to consider that. The other important part about age 26 is, in order for one to utilize the ABLE account, right now the disability onset is age 26 or younger. Now that is changing come 2026, and they're going to be increasing that age to 46. So ages have impact when we're talking about this planning. Legacy planning is we need to consider, right? Because sometimes people are like, I'm going to spend every last dollar, you know, by the time that I die. Well, for parents that are caring for somebody, legacy planning is really critical, because we have to make sure that there's going to be assets left behind to fund a special needs trust. And we need to understand not only that, but how each asset is going to be taxed upon death, and what assets are better left to a special needs trust versus maybe to other heirs or siblings. We need to consider beneficiary designations. Not everybody understands that contracts go by law. So if you have a life insurance contract, if you have a 401k, an IRA, annuities, these all supersede a will. And sometimes these don't line up, because people think when they get their will done that everything goes by the will, and it doesn't. So we need to make sure that the right information is on those contracts. Oftentimes when we are reviewing these contracts, we find that the loved one's name is outright named on life insurance or as a contingent beneficiary on an IRA. So we need to make sure that the special needs trust is named there. Another thing to consider is that distribution of wealth to the next generation might not always be equal, right? And fair is not always equal. So how can we take care of the next generation in the most equitable way? So that comes into play when we are doing our planning. And then we need to consider 2 lifetimes of income, as Carolyn just mentioned, and that there's certain risks that can erode our wealth over time. So as Carolyn mentioned, putting the oxygen mask on yourselves is equally as important as putting the oxygen mask on your children.
Great. That was a really comprehensive answer. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Next question. What areas of financial wellness do you cover when working with clients? Do you have a process? And if so, what does that process look like?
We do have a very methodical process, and we cover really all areas of financial wellness. And I'll kind of talk more the process first. As I said earlier, I think of us as a financial coach. And if you look at any sports team, especially a major league sports team, you're going to have a head coach. And that's what I kind of see Joanna and I as. But then they're going to have a whole bunch of different coaches that are going to work for them or work with them. And so we'll do the same thing. There's all kinds of areas in people's financial worlds that they don't think about necessarily as connected, but they all are. Even just, you know, what kind of car insurance do you have? If you don't have the right car insurance and you were to have a car accident that were to be your fault, that could completely erode and take away all the planning you've done for yourself or sometimes for your child. And so while we don't sell home and auto insurance, nor are we licensed to provide it, we will connect with your home and auto insurance person or different brokers to make sure that you understand what you have, that you have the proper coverage, and if we can do it, get the best price for it. And you know, that's just one example, but we really are going to work with all the different types of professionals, the attorneys, the CPAs, you know, even mortgage brokers, real estate agents, all of the different areas. The areas that we are licensed to provide are different types of investments. Between Joanna and I, we can basically handle any type of investment out there. We work with individuals, we can work with companies to build their 401k plans and that type of thing. We can work with IRAs, 401ks, what have you. And then we also work in different areas of insurance. And when I talk about insurance, it's really more life insurance, long-term care insurance, and disability insurance. And there's a lot of financial advisors that straddle that line one side or the other, and they may be very well versed in investments, but they may not understand insurance, or they may just work on insurance and they don't understand investments. And what happens when you tend to work with them is their answer is always whatever that they work in, because that's what they're familiar with. And it's not that maybe their answer is not right, but if you don't have both sides of the story, are you really sure the answer is right? And so Joanna and I really do our due diligence. We do our ongoing training. We're going to a training session all day tomorrow. There's always something more to learn. There's always something more to know on both sides of this field. We've both just recently got a designation for investments, goal planning investments. And it's something to where we really want to make sure that we really understand both sides so we can bring to you the right fit for you and your situation for today. The big thing I said there about building goals for investments is huge too, because a lot of advisors or a lot of clients, they look at that accumulation phase from now until they retire as how much money can I build? And I don't know if you all remember many, many years ago when ING was still ING before they were Capital One. They used to have a commercial on TV with people carrying around their big numbers of how much their retirement number was supposed to be. And we always kind of giggle at that because first of all, how do you know what that number is? Second of all, how do we know what taxes and inflation are going to do to that number? How do we know what healthcare or law changes are going to do to that number? And how do we know what our health is going to be in retirement? So the whole idea of having a number is crazy. But even if you have that number and it's somehow the right number and you somehow get to that number, what do you do with it then? How do you build it into an income stream that you don't outlive and that you know what you have? And if markets don't cooperate with you, you're still going to be able to retire the way you want to. And so that's really, you know, one of the pieces of work that we do. We do holistic, comprehensive planning, but we really are going to specialize in the weeds on ourselves on making sure you've got the right insurance and you've got the right investments.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. What common mistakes do you see when you first meet clients, and how can our families avoid making these mistakes?
Yeah, so this is something that really speaks to my heart. So I'm just going to give you a little story about my own family and what they would have done had things played out. So like I mentioned, I grew up with two sisters with different disabilities. My one sister had Down syndrome, and my other sister's severe mental illness, which later turned into addiction. And my parents' plan was that if anything happened to them, of course, they assumed, you know, we would take care of my sister with Down syndrome, and that they would leave their assets to be split between my other sister who had severe mental health issues. And that we would take care of my sister and they wouldn't leave assets to her, right? So common mistake number one, disinherit, right? Because families are scared about leaving assets behind because of the $2,000 federal law, which has not changed in a very long time. And we're going to talk more about that. So in order to protect her government benefits, let's just disinherit her. We're going to give a morally obligated gift to the other siblings, common mistake number two, and then they're going to actually take care of the person like my sister Stella. Okay, so that wouldn't have played out very well in my family, can I just tell you, because had they done that, my sister with mental health would have spent every last dollar of it, and none of it would have gotten to my sister. I went through a divorce, and so 50% of those assets would have been lost in the divorce. And so you can see where my parents had their intentions in the right place. It just wasn't done the correct way. So all the while, these dollars were meant for my one sister with Down syndrome. It never would have happened. Unfortunately, I lost both sisters, so it's a moot point, but this happens all the time and we see it. The other mistake number 3, is leaving assets directly to someone on benefits. Sometimes parents just don't know that they can't have any more than $2,000 in their name if they're receiving certain government benefits, or they haven't shared the planning with relevant family members. And now a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle have left assets directly to the person that's on government benefits. So mistake number 3, and then we have to do some reactive planning there. Mistake number 4 is no plan at all. So let's go back to procrastination, right? Procrastination can have a tremendous impact on the quality of life of your loved one when there is no plan in place. Mistake number 5 that we see often is working with professionals who are not specialized in this area. We review the estate documents, we review the special needs trust. I can tell you how many times I've seen payback provisions in a third-party special needs trust, or I see CPAs who are not, they're not filing for exemptions or deductions where they otherwise could have. Or financial planners who never ask the question, is any of your children, do they have disabilities? Are they on benefits? And their names are all over beneficiary designation forms. So it is crucial that you work with professionals that are not dabbling in this area, but that are really specialized in this area so that we can avoid a lot of these common mistakes that we see.
Great, thank you. I was writing these down. I missed mistake number 2.
Sure, morally obligated gifts. They're not binding.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so let's move on to the next question. Those were great tips. What risks should I consider in my overall planning so that I can best prepare for our retirement and my loved one's future care management plan?
There's so many different risks, and I think sometimes, like as we start working with clients, we talk through risks early on, and this is just my head baggage. I always worry that they're going to think that we're just too conservative and we're expecting the worst to happen, and we're not. But with anything, if we understand the playing field in front of us, we can really get a full assessment of how can we best play through that game. So when we look at retirement planning, and we'll talk about that first. Some of the biggest risks are just things like inflation. I can save so many dollars, but what we've just seen the last 2 years with what inflation has done to our money, let's compound what that's done to the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Market risk. We all put money into the stock market, and we all kind of do this a little bit to hope we have the right allocation, and we hope that the gods of the stock market are good to us. There's a lot more that we can do to protect you than just putting dollars in funds that we like the sounds of. But at the same time, if the full market goes down, the full market goes down. And there's very specific years shortly before and shortly after you retire that it's critical that we really have protection against market risk. Our health is a huge risk. What happens if? And when I look at a couple that are retiring together, if one lives a very, very long retirement and one lives a very short retirement, there can be a huge risk to the financial plan because they may lose a pension if there's a pension. They will lose one of the Social Securities. And yet the household costs are relatively the same. So, it doesn't help them at all when that happens. But even if both of the couple live a very, very long time, then you've just got longevity risk. And longevity risk means obviously you're spending more of your dollars for more years, but it amplifies market risk and inflation and all of those things. And then there's just the idea that we don't control the world, even though we all like to think we do. There's future tax risk. We don't know what the government's going to do to our tax codes down the road. Future tax law changes. There's so many different things. And when I go back to health, we then also look at long-term care. A nursing home costs somewhere around $100,000 a year. If we need long-term care and we are trying to leave an asset behind, we need to make sure that we've built a buffer so that we've got dollars for long-term care in case it's there. If it's not there, we don't want to spend money on something that you never used, but we want to make sure that we've got some sort of buffer system in there to pay for that so your legacy can still be your legacy. Then when we talk about, a future care management plan, then you've got a whole other host of stresses there. Everything we talked about for retirement planning is still a risk, but then you also have complications of the waiver I have today is not guaranteed to be here tomorrow. You've also got just the fact that there are law changes there too. And we also don't know, a family member may not understand the law and may leave money to our child and not tell us what they're doing until it's too late. So there's so many different types of risks, and they all have different consequences. So again, education through the process of working with clients and helping them really understand what's there, help them have conversations with their family members, help to put together a comprehensive program for them that are going to help build contingency plans for these risks is really where we try to shine.
Great, thank you. I think that's really important, especially because everyone's situation is so very unique. So, finding professionals like yourselves to really address these for everyone here on the audience who's working through these really unique situations. And I know another hot topic for our audience is special needs trusts versus ABLES accounts. So what's the difference between a special needs trust and an ABLE account? And how do you use these in your planning process?
Yeah, so I'm going to say once again, I'm not an attorney, so we're going to talk about this high level, and we'll go into a deeper dive at our next conversation with the attorney. But high level, a special needs trust is a legal document. It's written by a qualified attorney, and it puts essentially a protective bubble around the assets, right? And that protective bubble protects the government benefits. So, and there's two different types of special needs trust often that we look at when we're doing this type of planning. There's the first party special needs trust and the third party special needs trust. Now, first party special needs trust is a trust that we hope we don't ever have to open, because this is more of a reactionary trust. So let's just say, we have that aunt or uncle or grandparent that leaves a whole bunch of money to our child. Okay. Well, it's their money. It's first party. So it's the person, it's funded by the person who has the disability. There's the pro of it, which is, okay, we can still protect government benefits. The caveat is that with the first party special needs trust, there's a Medicaid payback provision, right? So if there's any dollars left at the end of the day and the person passes, Medicaid can come back and be like, hey, we want to be repaid for all of these things that all these bills that we incurred over this person's lifetime. So again, it's not a trust that we like to have to set up, but sometimes even if there's a malpractice lawsuit, we have to go the first party special needs route. The proactive special needs trust is the third party or supplemental special needs trust, and that is funded by anybody but the person with a disability. So third party person funds a special needs trust, right? Protecting the government benefits. It can have an unlimited amount of money. Each of those trusts can have an unlimited amount of money in there. It can actually hold real estate, inherited IRAs. There's a whole bunch of different asset types that a first party and a third party special needs trust can hold. There is no contribution limit on an annual basis. Okay. And I say that because that's what differs between the special needs trust and the ABLE accounts. And again, the main purpose is let's make sure we protect these benefits. And the purpose of the special needs trust is to really fund extra expenses that public benefits are not going to cover. So think of like quality of life expenses. And we can, certainly dive into more of those nuances when we speak in September, and we'll have the attorney there to do so. So now the ABLE account is really a savings vehicle. So it's written under the same code as the 529, it's actually 529A, and it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And it's for our individuals who, are on benefits, who have a disability, and they want to save some money, right? So, and they want to make sure that they can do it in a way that doesn't endanger their eligibility for their benefits, such as Medicaid and SSI, or supplemental security income. Now, as I mentioned before, with the ABLE account, it limits the eligibility to individuals with an onset of disability before turning age 26. As I mentioned, with the new Secure Act 2.0, this is increased to age 46, but it will not start until the year 2026. Why? That's just, it is what it is. Unfortunately, I wish it would have started sooner. Now, the ABLE account can receive after-tax contributions from anybody, including the person with a disability, okay? And the limitations on the contributions this year are $17,000 per year. Individuals can have a total balance of $100,000 without affecting government benefits in there. So you have to watch the account, because if the earnings go over, we need to consider that. There's many states out there that have these programs. So if you're outside of Pennsylvania, you might want to check your own state's program. But for today's purposes, we'll talk about the PA ABLE accounts. And you can go to paable.gov. You can get more information on there. If you are a PA resident and you establish a PA ABLE account, you'll receive the PA state income tax deduction for contributions into the plan. You can keep it in cash. There's a few different investment accounts that you can put the dollars in. Now, with people that are working, many of our individuals have part-time jobs. And so or even sometimes full-time jobs, if the individual is working and there is an employer-sponsored plan at their place of work, and obviously they can't contribute because it's going to kick them out of benefits, they can actually contribute an additional $13,590 as of 2023. And all of the earnings in the account are tax deferred and can be withdrawn without taxes for qualified disability-related expenses. Now, they say qualified disability-related expenses. I can tell you, if you go onto the PA ABLE website, you're going to see the list is really broad. It includes housing and rent, transportation, education, food, funeral, burial. There's just the list is really, really broad. So if you're curious, I would go on and check out that website. There's no PA inheritance tax on this account. And when we're considering using these accounts is really if your child, say, receiving some income from SSI or SSDI, and maybe they have a part-time job and they're really bumping up that $2,000 asset limit. What we'll start to do is we'll start to push over funds to the ABLE account, or maybe it's right before they've applied for SSI and we need to kind of spend down their accounts. We'll put money into the ABLE account. But just remember, it can only take up to $17,000 per year. So we need to be strategic about it, right? And let's see what else. So this is another thing. It does not supplant a special needs trust. It is a good supplement to a special needs trust. Remember, the special needs trust can hold many different assets, can have an unlimited amount of money in there, and can receive unlimited contributions on a yearly basis. So again, the ABLE account and the special needs trust, we work with them both, and we need them both as a part of our planning. The one thing in Pennsylvania, so with the ABLE account, Pennsylvania cannot seek Medicaid payback from an ABLE account once an owner/beneficiary passes. However, if there is an estate established, I always, tell people Medicaid could seek repayment during the time the individual had the ABLE account. So oftentimes, when we're using the ABLE account, we have money in there, we're going to be using it versus really saving in it, because there is the potential for state recovery. I think I covered most of the things that we would want to talk about. And as far as funding special needs trust, I think Carolyn's going to talk about that. But again, we need to make sure that that there's not just a legal document, that it's actually a funded special needs trust, not necessarily while you're alive because you are the trust fund, but when you're no longer here.
Great, yeah, that was a great overview of the two different trust types and then the PA-able accounts. So what are good funding strategies for special needs trusts, and when should our families start a funding strategy?
Well, as Joanna said, we generally will recommend that you want to really basically fund the trust at your passing. There's not really a need to fund it ahead of time because you are paying for the expenses at that point. And there really is no cookie cutter answer as far as what asset's going to be best, because it will depend on the client's situation. What assets do they have, and really what everything looks like. But every different asset has different taxation consequences and different ways that the law looks at it when it goes into a trust and passes on. One of the things that we tend to look at quickly and with many people is, could a life insurance policy, a permanent life insurance policy, be something that could be put into a special needs trust? And we do that really just by beneficiary. So you could purchase a life insurance policy on your own life. The first beneficiary might be your spouse. Secondary beneficiary may be the special needs trust. If you have multiple children and you wanted to break the beneficiaries, you can do it that way as well. And then life insurance, by definition, it's life insurance. So the minute you pass and the proper paperwork is given to the insurance company, within a couple of days, the check is written and sent out to the beneficiary. And that can then fund the special needs trust for you. What's very nice about doing it through a life insurance policy is we can do all of the mathematics ahead of time to figure out what are the projected needs for this child, what will they need in best circumstances and worst circumstances, and we'll come up with a number that we want to try to plan to have for this child at certain ages. And then we'll look and say, well, what if we backed into if we left a certain death benefit behind, whether it's life insurance or other assets, will that cover all of those needs at a conservative rate of return and blah, 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 blah. And so we'll come up with a number. And what's neat about life insurance is you buy a number. It's not like you have somebody invested in the stock market that can go up and go down a million times before you ever get to the point that you need the dollars. And the life insurance will be there. Certain types, it's very, very, there's so many guarantees to it, it's crazy. And so we can pretty much say, as long as we have the policy in place and you're funding it the way you need to fund it, it'll be there. And what most people really appreciate about it is that then that gives them the permission slip to spend their other dollars in retirement. So we can build those retirement plans for the client and then say, this is over here to be able to do that. And people do that with life insurance all the time to leave beneficiaries dollars and to build legacies. And sometimes they do it for charitable needs and things of that nature. But we just find to benefit a special needs trust, this really is the easiest solution if it works the best in your situation.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to run through these last three questions. How do you work with clients to maximize their government benefits? What are important ages to remember when it comes to government benefits? I know you mentioned 18, 22, and 26 earlier, Joanna.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight that government benefits, while we use them, we know that they're not going to cover everything. They're going to give you the basis, but they're not really there to give you future care and quality of life, which we know is most likely going to be self-funded. But we need to obtain them, we need to maintain them, and like I said, we need to maximize what we can. Our goal is to leverage what we can from the government so that we can maximize what the family can do from a self-funded perspective, and we certainly know that care is not cheap. So the first thing we need to do is identify what benefits people are on, which can be so confusing. The terms are intertwined all the time. Most times I can tell by the numbers or maybe even the day that people are getting paid what benefits they're on, because there's two different programs that we're working with. We're working with SSI, we're working with SSDI. SSI is tied to Medicaid, SSDI is tied to Medicare. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll ask people to request what's called a benefit planning query. The form is SSA 2459. Sometimes the acronym is BPQY. And so that'll tell us exactly what people are on. They could be on all 4 benefits at the same time, which can make it even more confusing. So we want to understand what they're on, because there's certain income limit, asset limits that we need to consider for what benefits they're on. In order to qualify, and I'm going to kind of speed through this because I know we're limited on time. Your individual needs to have a medical diagnosis, but not specifically. The guidelines for the Social Security Administration are going to look different than what the medical diagnosis is given from the doctor. Just because someone has a disability doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to qualify for benefits. And for children under the age of 18, that definition is that the child has to have a medically determinable physical or mental impairment that causes marked or severe functional limitations. And it's expected to last, or has lasted, for at least 12 months and is expected to result in death. And the child's not, working. Over 18, different definition. And that is really the inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of a physical or a mental impairment, which can be expected to result in death or lasted for a continuous period of not more than 12 months. So I just said a whole bunch of stuff. So basically, most of the time we're looking at adults over the age of 18 and looking at the fact of, can they work or can they not work? Or is their work limited, right, because of their disability? The first thing we do when we're working with our clients is, if they are 18, because most of our clients are not going to qualify for SSI before 18, because they're going to count the parents' financial assets. But when your child turns 18, they're financially emancipated from you. So oftentimes we're telling our clients, apply for SSI when they turn 18. This is a needs-based benefit, okay? So they need to be eligible financially and medically to qualify for this. And this benefit currently this year is $914 per month. And that's supposed to cover, everything, food, shelter, $914 a month. I know it's a lot of money. And to some people it is. So we want to make sure that we obtain it and protect it. Now, the SSI is tied to, like I said, Medicaid and waivers. We need to keep wages under $1,913 per month, so $1,913 per month, and we need to keep resources under $2,000, which is why we use the ABLE account, or we have the Special Needs Trust. Again, there's discussions right now to increase that to $10,000 per individual, $20,000 per married couple, but right now it stands at $2,000. The list of what's non-countable as far as assets go is a much smaller list than what is counted. So rule of thumb, don't save in your child's name, don't give out their social security number, because we don't want them to have more than $2,000. And in order to maximize that benefit, what we're going to do is we're going to charge them room and board for their fair share of living in the home. And we do that because otherwise Social Security will cut their that paycheck of $914 by a third. It's called in-kind supports and maintenance. So we charge our individuals room and board, and then sometimes that room and board charge that we're charging our kids, we turn around and we fund a life insurance policy with it. So that's just one strategy in the number of strategies that we work with our clients. Another way to maximize that benefit is, like I said, oftentimes our individuals are working. They can write off impairment-related work expenses if they are working. Now, Social Security disability, whole nother system in the Social Security Administration. It's under Title II. SSI is under Title 16. If you care about the titles, but this is an entitlement, and it's based upon our work record and our contributions from our paycheck into the Social Security system. And Social Security disability, or SSDI, is tied to Medicare. So if our loved one, there's a way for our loved ones to qualify for SSDI based on our work record. Once they, if the parent is working, and let's just say the parent becomes disabled, they can actually file, the child can actually file for Social Security income. based off the working record of the parent. If the parent, when the parent retires, let's say they go to file their Social Security, now the child can actually file for Social Security under the parent's work record. And that amount is approximately 50% of the full retirement amount. We call it the primary insurance amount. Once the parent passes, that amount goes up to 75%. So oftentimes that's a lot more than what they're going to get on SSI. Okay, so that is under what they call the DAC benefit, disabled adult child benefit, also known as the childhood disability benefit. But again, the onset of disability has to be 22 or younger. Okay, they could also qualify on their own work history. So sometimes our individuals are working and they're paying into Social Security, and sometimes they will flip onto Social Security disability based on their own work record. But again, maintaining and obtaining and protecting these benefits are really critical. There are people out there to navigate this system with you. You do not have to do it alone. There are benefits experts, and there's also disability attorneys that you can work with to apply for these benefits if you do not want to do the legwork yourself.
Great. So final two questions. How do investments shift when planning for 2 lifetimes of income?
It's funny, as we work with clients that are getting close to retirement, there's a term we use called time horizon. And time horizon basically is just how long until you're going to start to withdraw funds from these investments. The closer we get to that time horizon, the smaller that number is, the more conservative we should be with the investments, because a lot more can go wrong if we have a jump in the market or a drop in the market over the short period of time. And if we've got somebody that has assets that are invested, and we've got, maybe they have a child with special needs that they want to make sure that they're staying invested for, we're going to make sure that we're breaking down, okay, this bucket of money over here is going to be for your assets, and let's look at this specific time horizon, and let's be very conservative as we invest. Then there might be these dollars over here. If you were to pass away yesterday, these dollars need to then fund what's going on for your child in this first so many years. So these probably also need to be relatively conservative. But your child may be here for another 30 years after you're gone. So let's take a little bit more risk, because we're not going to use these dollars over here in that third bucket of money as much. So we can then take more risk and hopefully then get a better rate of return. So it's really trying to really take a look at what assets are there, how exactly are we going to be using them, what is that time horizon, what is your risk tolerance, and how is it going to be set up for basically investment management once you're not there. And then from there, we can put together the right strategy for you to try to maximize gains without taking too much risk.
Great. And then final question before we get to the Q&A, which is coming into the chat. So keep typing those or putting them into the Q&A as they've come to you. What is a letter of intent, and why is it important to begin writing one?
Yeah, so a letter of intent, it's not a legal document, but it can accompany your legal documents. It's really like, it's a journal of a day in the life of your loved one. It's there really to guide the next person in line who's going to be caring for your loved one, about their care, about their what you envision as quality of life. So start thinking about all the things that you do as parents on autopilot every day. Okay, we need to get that pen to paper to document these things, because we don't know the day that we're going to be taken off this planet. Right. So if you're gone yesterday and there's going to be someone that's going to be caring for your loved one, what do they need to know? Who do they need to know? What therapies are they in right now? What doctors are in place? What medications are in place? What do they like to do? Right. So maybe they like to go to ball games. Maybe they like to go to the beach once summer. Whatever it is that you envision for your loved one, and all those things that you do on a day-to-day basis, this is a letter about your loved one, so that there is a somewhat seamless transition if you were to be gone yesterday. And this is going to evolve over time, right? Because goals change, people change. The relevant people in the world might change, in their world might change. So what we can do for you, and as a follow-up, is we can send out our template to help get you started. And I tell people, just take like one chapter at a time, take one section of this at a time, so it's not so overwhelming. Maybe this week you're working on the doctors. Next week you're working on friends and family, right? So, because this process can be overwhelming. So what Carolyn and I do is we really try to break this down into bite-sized pieces, so it's not so overwhelming for our families.
That's a really great recommendation to get started with. Thank you both for so much information on this topic. I took a few notes throughout and put those in the chat for everyone who might be more of a visual learner. Not everything, but try to get some of those highlights. And we have some great questions coming in. So thank you both again. I'm going to end the recording and then we'll open up the Q&A.